All right, I'm going to go ahead and start the broadcast, and I'm going to mute my line while Amanda goes through the introductions.
Okay.
Here we go.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending. We are ready to get started with today's Board Docs webinar. This webinar will last around an hour and will conclude by 2 p.m. We encourage you to send your questions into the question and answer box, and we will address those throughout the webinar. This session will be recorded and shared, and a link to the recording along with the slides will be emailed after the webinar. Today, we're delighted to have Tracy Glanz, City of Orleans in Wyoming, the Treasurer and Clerk, as well as Michelle Cooper, Senior E-Governance Specialist for Board Docs, and Dottie Schindlinger, VP of Governance and Technology for Diligent. Welcome, everyone, and Dottie, I'm going to turn the webinar over to you.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. It's great to be here with you, and really great to be here today with Tracy Glanz and Michelle Cooper, my two colleagues. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. And what I'd like to do is to ask Tracy to start by just giving a little bit of an overview of the City of Orland and a little bit of background about her council. Tracy?
Hi, Dottie, thanks. I'm Tracy Glanz. I'm the Clerk Treasurer with the City of Orland. We're located in the Bighorn Basin in western Wyoming and actually the county seat of Washakie County. We have a population of about 5,400, and the city's mission is to build and maintain a high quality of life for our residents. We do have a very diversified, strong economy. We have a great education system and an excellent healthcare system. I have been a Board Docs LT user since 2016. As you can see on the screen, it has such ease of use. It's quick access to agendas, documents, historical information, and the data is available to our council members, any members of the public, board members on any of their devices, on their tablets, their cell phones, computers, whatever they have. And the public, I think it's a real advantage to the public because I don't have as many questions coming at me for information on what's going on at the council meetings because it's all right there in front of them. And they can easily search for it and see that information in any documents that are attached to the agenda. As you see there, I went ahead and put in a lot of historical information from our city council minutes. I went back and put all the way back to 2011 on here. That way, if the public wants to see it, they can go back and pull out any minutes from any of those years and look at it. The last 3 years, 2016 to 2018, actually still have the documents attached. So if there's any, say, bid specs or anything that was attached to a particular meeting, then that document's still there and they can still go back and view it. So it's so easy for the public and for the council members to see. So
Tracy, that's great. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about, some of the kinds of information that you make available to the public in advance of each one of the board meetings.
When I create the agenda, there are council minutes, like a public hearing notice, excuse me, like liquor license hearing that lists all the liquor license applicants. If there's any board and commission reports, those are also placed on the agenda here. Anything like that, financials, anything that the council needs to act on. Any of those documents. There is a way to privatize those documents, like for instance a payroll voucher that has more information on it that isn't public, that is only viewable to the council, and that's a nice aspect of this program. It's very easy to use.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think you would also mention that some of the things that you've been doing are providing some of the minutes and board actions so that people don't need to call to get that information. Do you want to talk a little bit about how things have changed since you started doing that?
Right. I used to get a lot of calls about minutes and where to find them and if they could come make copies and questions like that. Now I don't get those calls anymore because I can just direct them to Board Docs if I do get a call, and they can go out there and just click on those minutes, and it pulls right up. So, and when I create the minutes, I go ahead and do it in Board Docs, where there was an option there in the last screen to edit minutes. I can go in there and I don't think it shows though on that last screen now that I said that. But there is an option there where you can edit the minutes, and then you can release the minutes when you've got them ready for the public to view. When you've got them all written up, you can release those, and then they're available for the public. So it's very transparent for the public, for the documentation and the minutes, because it used to be that I sent the council packet by email to my council members, so the public didn't have that information readily available to them.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And Tracy, we're going to come back and ask you a few questions. I know we've got some questions that are coming in, and I want to encourage anybody else who has questions they'd like to pose to our panel to please put those into the Q&A box on your GoToWebinar control panel, and I'll make sure to pose those when we get to the Q&A section. But before we do that, I want to turn it over to Michelle Cooper. Michelle, do you mind sharing a few additional examples that you've seen working with a number of the Board Docs customers and how they can use this to increase transparency?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to, Dottie. I'm going to walk you through a few live examples of how these government agencies, cities, counties are using technology to leverage their projects, transparency efforts, and also their citizen engagement. What we see a lot is what we call data dumping, and there are ways to use transparency to help foster trust without just uploading everything and anything that you have. So this can help decision makers in your community make more informed decisions and help your organization really reach your entire community. Next slide, Dottie. Perfect. One of the first tools I want to talk about is mobility, and this has become a priority to everybody. Nowadays, people are extremely personal about the devices that they're on, and there are a million different types of devices. So using different avenues of reaching people and using a browser-based platform, you don't have to worry about not reaching a segment of your community. So really, regardless of whatever device someone's using, they'll have the same look, feel of your content as someone on a different device, and you can hop from device to device. And from a publisher standpoint, this gives you the flexibility to log into Board Docs using your username and password, and then you can create, manage, approve items from any device anywhere. Bryan, Texas, and I'm going to use them in a further example, but Bryan, Texas has done a really outstanding job of making sure that they reach their entire community, but almost just as importantly, in a way that doesn't add additional work to their staff's to-do list. All right, next slide. So Bryan's leveraged their online presence through branding, through their website, social media like Twitter and Facebook. They even have something called Polka, which generates, and then they have their public open meetings. This has really helped them shape their recent WJ Corridor project. So as you can see at the bottom of the page here, they lay out a plan of how they're going to approach this project. They want citizen feedback, and they make that plan accessible to the community. So they do it in a lot of different ways. All right, next one. The nice part is then they're seamlessly going to take this data, and they've tracked different stages of their project using Board Docs goal tracking. Not only are they able to track and measure their success or the completion of this project, but they can also go back to every meeting, committee, subcommittee that this project was discussed during, and view the results, navigate directly back to that meeting, and even watch that specific point in the meeting through streaming online video. So the best part of this is there's no extra work. It's literally a button that they click when they're creating these agenda items and they're putting together their meetings. So this one button actually ties together their entire project in one nice, neat little package. and they can include those citizen surveys and public information that they're getting in their public meetings, and it all ties together in board docs under one platform that can be seen by everybody. All right, next one, Dottie, thank you. I want to talk about the city of Carbondale. They've also been recognized as really leaders in municipal innovation and technology, as well as transparency. So Carbondale was a finalist in America's Best Communities because of their community first focused efforts and all their diverse methods that they use. So anything from podcasts. They have podcasts that were hosted by their mayor and other city officials, and these allow folks to join and hear about the initiatives that are going on with the city or upcoming projects. They've got citizen surveys, so they're asking their citizens for direct feedback of a wide variety of topics and issues. And then they have in-person, face-to-face meetings. So they've got Meet the Mayor, Coffee with a Cop. These events are focused on building trust and accentuating open government, that they really do want to make the best decisions and build their community. Also, they are making decisions or roadmap items, and they're communicating it in a clear, accessible manner through Carbondale's playbook. And they also have the mayor's State of the City address that's held at City Hall once a month. All right, next one, Dottie. So again, we're faced with a problem, right? We've thought outside the box. We've created these innovative tools to help engage our community. We have all of our public meeting information available and accessible, but we've built that trust to make our communities great. But now what, right? So how do we take this information and really leverage it in a seamless, concise manner without bogging down our staff? And the answer is board docs. Board docs not only does meeting management, but it ties that information that you're putting together with your strategic goals or projects. And it all integrates all together, the information that's easy to use, it's easy to track, it's easy to measure, and it's tied together with your public meetings. So by simply clicking on a specific goal when an agenda is created, it actually is essentially tagging that event to that goal. So those actions taken during the meeting are tied back and ultimately really improves the way we govern. One more thing I wanted to talk about is what we see here with Carbondale's Downtown Master Plan. It's a blueprint of the direct growth cities created for the future of the city. So with so many moving parts of this project and so many different departments involved, it can understandably be very easy to lose track of the progress or focus on or even lose track of the public's opinion. So every step of the way, the city of Carbondale has really brought together all these different efforts to improve transparency, but they've got a very easy tool to be able to manage all the moving components. So that's what I've got today. If you'd like to hear more, please reach out to us and we'd love to hear from you.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you so much for kind of walking through some of those examples, which I think are really very interesting. I wondered if you could maybe just comment really briefly on some of the concerns around how this kind of technology can help organizations meet their Sunshine Law requirements.
Yeah, that's a great question, and that becomes more of a concern to us every day. One of the ways we do that is we're trying to simplify the process. And a lot of people walk into going paperless with either a small or a great amount of fear. They think this is going to be more work. They think it's going to be technology that they can't understand, or that it's going to take forever to put together information. It's really just the opposite. We want to give you a tool that really increases your ability to get your information out to your citizens, be able to tackle that issue of security, and also tackle that issue of mobility. So we want to make sure everybody's able to see this information. And then on top of it, people are able to log in and see what's going on. So it's not that they don't want to come to our meetings and listen to the public meeting and process, but I'm a mom of 2 little ones, and I can say it's not that I'm not involved with my city, but it makes it very hard for me to attend meetings. So having that information online and accessible and transparent really changes the way that your community thinks about its governing body.
That's great. Yeah, that's really very interesting, and I I think that can certainly be very true. And I'd like to ask Tracy if you wouldn't mind to comment a little bit on how things can change once you start to use this kind of technology. And I wondered if you could share with us, maybe a little bit of the before and after. So what it was like for you preparing for board meetings and facilitating all of that information flow before you had these tools in place, and then how things changed afterwards, and maybe just talk a little bit about that process. Tracy, are you muted perchance? We can't hear you.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. No problem.
Yes, before we started using Board Docs, I used a lot of paper, and it took me, probably a day, at least day and a half sometimes, to get all the paperwork ready. It took at least an hour or 2 copying time because I have 10 members of my governing body, so I had to make 10 copies of everything. So there was a lot of wasted time, a lot of wasted paper, a lot of use on the copier. And like I said, there wasn't much easy access for the public to see what was actually included in the agenda as far as the documentation, because those were just emailed out to the council members. After Board Docs, I can, throughout the week before the meeting, I can just save documents as they come to me, and when I get ready to do my agenda, send out the Friday before, I just make sure everything's attached to the agenda, which doesn't take hardly any time at all, and let the council members know that it's out there and it's ready to view and it's all ready to go. It saves so much time compared to what I had to do before, and a lot of paper.
That's really terrific. I wondered, could you also maybe share with those that are on the phone today, how difficult or easy was it to get everybody up to speed doing this? I mean, what kind of training had to be provided, and did you get any pushback or challenges from anybody about doing this? I'm just curious to know about that process.
It really, when somebody from Board Docs came and we only spent maybe an hour on training, I had purchased tablets for all my members. And so part of it was getting used to the tablets. And then the other part was getting used to Board Docs. But the program is so easy that that 1 hour training was enough. And at my next council meeting, it was just a matter of, I think it was more harder for them to remember how to sign on or what their password was than it was to use Board Docs, because it is so easy to use and requires little or no training. So
remembering that password is always the challenge, isn't it? It's
true.
Sort of like the number one question in tech support is, I can't remember my password. So,
right.
But if you can get over that hurdle, then everything else becomes pretty simple. That's great. Thank you, Tracy. Michelle, I wondered if, go ahead, please. Yeah.
Well, I was going to mention that I did have some feedback, like Michelle said, that they wanted their paper. And so the first meeting I did give them a little bit of paper, and then I weaned them off of that, and they're fine without their paper. So
how long did it take you to go completely paperless and wean them off the paper? How long did you allow for that process to happen?
Oh, maybe a month if I went that long. And I do just print off the agenda so that they have something to scribble on if they'd like. But
sure.
They don't get any paper.
That's great. That's really great. So I just want to remind everybody on the phone that I've got a number of questions that I'm eager to get to and ask Tracy and Michelle, but I'd love to pepper in your questions as well. So please make sure to send those questions over through the GoToWebinar control panel. You just go into the question box and I'll see those pop up on my screen, and I'll be able to pose them to our panelists today. And of course, if you've got any questions for me, don't hesitate to ask those as well. But Michelle, I wondered if I could ask you to follow up. I know in talking about City of Bryant and some of the other examples that you shared, if I'm not mistaken, I think they use this system not just for the main governing body meetings, but also for some of the committee work. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's true. And that's really one of the great benefits of board docs is it's unlimited. And when I say that, people usually roll their eyes and say, well, what do you mean by that? So that could be anywhere from bringing in archive content, so unlimited content, to unlimited users and unlimited user bodies and meeting bodies. So the way a lot of people use it is they really take advantage of going paperless citywide, and they'll implement this for committees and subcommittees. Your meetings can even be held publicly, like what we see with city councils, or they can be a subcommittee that meets in a non-public arena, and those could be marked as private. But having all of your information on board docs gives you that peace of mind that your information is secure. You don't have to worry about ransomware and cyber attacks. It's in one secure location, and really you get the benefit of doing this for every single department and every single meeting body you have. The other thing I want to mention, and Dottie brings up a really good point, is that a lot of us think about the way our governing meeting bodies work, and one committee might not act or vote or even look the same as far as agenda packets go. So keep that in mind that board docs does have the ability to really have each of these meeting bodies act like separate entities, but all be in one database. So if that's a concern, just sort of put your mind at ease, and we'll show you how that's done. But yeah, we want you to really get the most out of the system.
And Michelle, to that point, I just kind of pulled up a little screenshot here that you had from City of Bryant. And remind me, I think it's basically there's a little drop-down menu at the top that shows you all the different councils and committees and things that you're a member of. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. So as I'm going to talk about two different viewpoints. The first viewpoint is from a public standpoint, like what Dottie said. I can find information on committees that are made available to the public two separate ways. I can either go up to that right-hand corner where Dottie was pointing, and there'll be a drop-down menu of all the different committees. The other way is really my favorite way. A lot of times, and again, I mentioned I have two little ones, a lot of times I can't remember what I did last week, let alone 2 years ago. So if you need to find information that you don't remember exactly where it is, or maybe it's cross committee where it starts out in one committee and gets moved to the next, or it's discussed at multiple ones at the same time, our search feature actually searches all the way down to the attachment level. So I may be looking for a zoning map or even a street number in that zoning map, and I can pull that map up by searching the metadata within all of my content. And if it does appear on multiple meetings, it makes it very easy to find all that information in one spot.
That's really great. And I actually wondered if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit more about that meta search in terms of, just again, going back to our theme of transparency, if a member of the public, or let's say maybe a member of the media, wanted to go back and find out, how many times the council had discussed a particular topic and on what days they had discussed it, how would they go about doing something like that through the system?
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain, and all of you sitting out there know this real pain, but I've been doing this long enough to remember the days that if that happened, if a member of the public asked for information, or even a council member asked when was the last time we discussed XYZ, the great hunt begins, right? Where we go down to the basement, or we go into that closet where all of our archived information is kept in paper form, and we start digging. And it could take a day, it could take weeks. So now being able to search across all of this information makes it easy for us as staff, because it really puts the power and the open information that's their right to have, the public's ability to see what's going on with their city, in the user's hands. And that way they don't have to trudge down the city hall, they don't have to wait in line, and you don't have to go hunting for it. They can find that information, the press can find that information, and they're able to pull up the information that's designated for them. Keep in mind, we do have a seamless way to be able to create one packet with different permission levels. So if your council asks for information, they're going to have their council designated packet with that council, necessarily confidential information, but it may be citizen information or staff phone numbers or contracts, things like that that are included in a city council or county commissioner's packet. They'll be able to search that content as well.
That's really terrific. Thank you for that. And Tracy, I wondered if you wanted to comment on any part of that as well, because I'm sure you get asked a lot of questions from folks about, when was the last time something got discussed, and maybe it's not coming from the public, maybe it's even just coming from one of the council members. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, that process for you.
Well, and I wanted to say too, on this screen here, it shows in that right-hand corner where you have a policies tab. That includes your city ordinances. So anytime a council member wants to, when they're on that screen, they can go to that policies and it takes you right to your city ordinances. And like Michelle said, it's so easy to use that search tab because I've been in the basement myself as well. And you can just type any word that if you're looking for dog licenses, you can type that in the search screen and it'll bring up dog licenses from anybody that uses Board Docs, not just the city of Worland, but any city that's discussed that certain topic. It'll bring up that information on what their discussion was or what their passage of an ordinance was or an ordinance. So it's very handy.
That's really terrific. And just to that point, I know, something that Michelle mentioned that I think was really important to hover on here is, when it's doing that broader search, it's pulling up all of the publicly accessible data. So you don't have to go, making a bunch of phone calls to colleagues to try to get examples of things. You can just do a search and it will pull up everything, across cities, just as you've mentioned. But if there are, pieces of information that were tied to a closed session or, have some sensitive information that needed to be kept, out of the public side because they were part of executive discussion, executive session, you can keep that information marked private. And so that would obviously not be returned in that meta search, particularly if it's something like an HR issue or things like that have to be kind of kept under wraps because of the nature of the materials. So Tracy, any comments on that, by the way, in terms of how you've managed that navigation between what remains private to just the board or the council versus what needs to be made public, in the system? Have you had that experience of marking certain things as executive content versus public content?
Yes, and it's very easy to do. It's just a matter of making the document or the information private or public. And that's in a drop-down screen. And then you just put the content that you're attaching into the executive area instead of the public area. So it's very easy to do. And then on the side of the screen, when you look at the agenda, it will show like a padlock on it if it's private. I'm trying to think where that would be.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we have a screenshot that shows that, but basically when there's, something that is marked private on the agenda, you're right, it shows up with a little tiny padlock to let you know that that's executive content, and you can still see the rest of the agenda and the rest of all the attachments that are part of that public agenda.
Right.
Yep.
But very easy to use.
And Dottie, that brings up a really good point, is that when I'm discussing the solution for the first time, we have a few different ways of being able to display information. Like what Tracy said, if there's something that's an executive session, you can mark it private. But there's also those items that are a little bit of everything, right? Where we need to give our public a good idea of what this item is. And then there may be a contract that our legal team needs to look over, but the public doesn't necessarily need to be able to look at right away. And then there's that third category of our executive team and our council. They're the ones that see everything. So you can really decide what permission tier it needs to fit into, either by meeting body, or item, or even a little bit of everything within one item. But we just want to simplify it to where you don't have all these different versions floating around there.
Right. I think that version control is so incredibly important. You're exactly right, because I think you can end up having multiple versions of the same information and just absolutely confuse people. So that's really helpful. Michelle, I'm wondering if you could also talk a little bit. I know you've worked with a number of the Board Doc subscribers over time, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, what do you think are some of the big challenges for municipal bodies making this kind of a change or implementing this type of an approach? What have you seen have been some of the biggest challenges, and what have been some of the clever ways that people have come around those challenges? Or if there are challenges that continue to persist, what are those?
Things that I'm seeing more and more now is we hear about all these horror stories of ransomware and cyber attacks. So a lot of people have the idea that, well, my information's on our server and so it's secure. But what happens is we hear about these other cities and counties that are experiencing this, but if we're not proactive when it happens to us, it's that I can't believe this happened, and we have some 17-year-old hijacking our content for $5,000. My own city had the fire and rescue shut down recently because somebody had hacked into the phone system, and so we had to divert all 911 calls to the city across the lake from us. So I would say one of the main concerns is security. But then the other big concern that we hear when people are looking at implementing this type of solution is they think of it as about as much fun and years and papers and stacks of information that they need to bring in. So I'll say, on top of having our outstanding free on-site training, one of the things that people do to really simplify this and make it a lot more fun for everybody is that there are little ways to add information into the system. So for instance, you don't have to reformat all your past agendas and minutes if you want to go back more than 3 years or even starting fresh. All of your archived information can be brought in and stored in the Board Docs library. That way, again, because everybody, and bringing it as a PDF, it's a lot like attaching an attachment to an email. You grab that content, either drag and drop it in, or you can click on the items that you want to add, and then you click save. So years of content can be saved and converted into Board Docs within minutes. And then on top of it, because we search all the way through that attachment for the metadata, now your past content is also searchable. So don't coming into this that I see this as months and months of work with time that I don't have. There are a lot of very, very easy ways to bring in that information.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for that explanation. Tracy, was that true for you? How was that the same or different for you?
No, that is pretty much the same. It was just a matter of making sure that I saved everything to PDF, and it's either drag and drop or double click and it's there. So it's very easy to use and convert your documents or put them into Board Docs. So that's not a problem at all. And I think maybe the smaller entities might have qualms about buying tablets for all their governing body, but you can get some pretty good tablets for less than $200. So
That's great. Yeah, I'm curious to know, Tracy. I know that you did end up going the route of buying technology for each one of the council members and for the senior staff. And so, how did you come to that decision? Because of course they could probably use whatever they have too, right? So maybe share with the audience a little bit about how you made the decision of what to provide versus what to just have people bring from home.
Well, I wanted to kind of I wanted the governing body to each have a tablet or something they could use here, but I wanted it to be here and not something they would be bringing back and forth, so that I could make sure it was always here, that they didn't forget it. And our department heads, there's been a couple of them that like their own iPads or their own tablets, so they bring theirs and they can log on there. So it was just a matter of me to make sure that that everyone could get to Board Docs easy enough on a tablet that was easy and simple to use, and that I could control here from the office so that we didn't lose them or forget them. So.
And a lot of people just don't like moving past giving up that mouse. So that's the nice part. You can either implement something across the board. I think eventually we'll all be using tablets because we're comfortable with it. But if you are a board that's concerned or maybe you're concerned about adopting the technology, just keep that in mind. Giving them something that may have a larger screen or have a mouse and a keyboard could make the world a difference. And it's only a difference of maybe $30, or you could find something cheaper.
That's really great. And Michelle, I wondered if you could also share a little bit about what you've observed. I know you've been to a lot of council meetings in your time working with board docs. I wonder if you
starting to make me feel old.
No, just very busy.
Yeah.
But I just wonder if you could share, just again, thinking about the transparency, if someone comes to the meeting, a member of the public, let's say, and they don't have a piece of technology in their hands, and of course you're not going to provide a computer for every person that attends as a guest. So what have you seen have been some of the ways that cities and counties have managed around that so that the members of the public can keep up with what's happening on the agenda, but without having to print out the entire packet for everyone who attends the meeting?
Yeah, exactly. And all of us can remember the days where we printed out 20. Knew a bunch of people were coming because a specific topic was being voted on or discussed, so we just went to the copy machine and camped out there. But now what cities can do is we have something called Scoreboard. All that is think Jerry Jones Cowboy Stadium. It's a way for you to take a very easy to read agenda and move through the items, specifically just you don't have to, but specifically your summary agenda. So those top points, you can move from one item to the next, and it's on a large monitor. And the great part about it is no one has to man that. It's an automatic scrolling agenda that allows people to see exactly what item they're on, what item's being discussed. It will tally votes. It's got a speaker timer, which people love, but it's a very easy way for you to prevent having to print out all of these copies. People know exactly what's going on, what's coming next, and most importantly, our staff doesn't have to add something else to their plate.
And Michelle, what version of the software has that capability, if you don't mind just mentioning that as well?
Yeah, exactly. So that's Board Docs Pro. I will say I've seen a lot of cities who have LT and a lot of counties that use LT just take the agenda in the way that we see it on our computer, and they present that during the meeting. And what that really takes is a toggle device. It allows you to go from maybe somebody who brought a PowerPoint in and it's being projected on a large screen back to the agenda. So there are ways to do it in both solutions. The voting and the automatic tally and the speaker timer, those are pro. However, there is a very inexpensive way for LT users to be able to do the same thing.
That's great. And Tracy, how do you do that at your place? So is that something that you're doing? Are you projecting it up on a screen, or how have you managed that process for your meetings?
Right. We have a projector, so we just project the agenda back up on the screen so that anybody can see the agenda.
And you mentioned, I think, that you also provide a printed copy of just the agenda, but not all the attachments. Is that correct?
That's correct. Right.
Yeah, and I think that's probably fairly common for a lot of our clients, where they'll basically have just the agenda printed out, but all the attachments and everything else. I mean, to Michelle's point, if they're using the pro version and the meeting control panel, you can just literally see it up on the screen, play by play, as everything is moving along, which is, I think, really, really, really helpful. So that's great.
And if you'd like to see,
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dottie. One more point is, if you'd like to see the details, keep in mind most of us don't leave the house without our cell phones. So you can pull it up right there in your seat, or you can look up and see it on the large monitor.
That's great. Yeah, I think that happens a lot. I know for the board that I serve on, I've gotten to the point where I just am looking at things on my phone, which is not always the best size screen, but sometimes it's exactly what I have and it gets me through. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like whatever you got in your hand, you can just go with that. It makes it a lot easier. So, well, we have a few minutes left in our time together. I know we had, blocked out for an hour, but we promised that we would go for about 45 minutes if we didn't get a ton of questions. And so I've been asking some questions, and again, I just want to remind people to go ahead and send your questions in. All you have to do is just put them into the question control, the GoToWebinar control panel under the question and answer box, and I'll be able to pose those to Tracy and to Michelle. I have a question for Tracy, actually. Tracy, I know you talked about that, this was not a terribly difficult thing to get implemented, for your city. And what I'd love to know is just how did you make the determination of spending the money to do this? Was that anything that was controversial? Was it difficult to get that support? How did you go about budgeting for this, and what was that process like?
It really wasn't that difficult. I actually had a couple council members that wanted to move into the 21st century and go to a tablet instead of all the paper. But after that, it was more of, kind of supporting the idea of purchasing the tablets, purchasing board docs. So, I just went back through my records and kind of got an estimate of what kind of dollars we were spending on paper, on the wear and tear on the copier, and my labor as well, and showed that to the council, and then thankfully got it presented in the next budget so that we could purchase the tablets and move ahead. So it really wasn't as bad a process as it could have been.
That's great. That's really, really good. And Michelle, I know you've had that conversation with many of our subscribers about how to estimate the cost and sort of get justification for it and support for it. So I wondered if you had some thoughts about some of the things that you've seen happening for some of the cities and counties that do this.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Is a lot of the cities that we talk to will say, well, I don't want to make a purchase because I don't want our citizens to feel that we're out there spending money on these gadgets. But ultimately what happens is if you do a side-by-side comparison, the system usually pays for itself within 6 months. If you're printing out enough packets, maybe 7 council members and your packets are 50 pages or more. But what I would suggest is if you're not sure what the world looks like right now, if you don't do a comparison of how much exactly it costs to produce a packet, give us a call and we'll walk through that process and how much your current process looks like. We'll even add in things like staff time and hours that we spend when we've got last minute changes or reprinting. Cities and counties even have some of their police stations or police officers delivering these packets to their members, where I think we can all agree that there are a lot more things that these folks can be doing. So give us a call, we'll walk you through that, and that way, if it's not a great fit, that's fine, but you have an apples to apple comparison. That way when you go to the board, it's not just, can I please have this? The council really sees value in what you're saving now and over time.
I think that's really good advice, and I think a good approach to kind of help people figure out the best way to navigate this. Tracy, I'm wondering, I want to kind of take a step back and go back to a topic that we talked about a little bit earlier, and just ask you a couple follow-up questions. And one is, I'm curious to know if you're using this same approach with the committees and other bodies within your government there, or are you really just focusing on the main governing body? And maybe you could talk a little bit about how you're managing that.
Well, we do have another like a planning commission board who was interested in using board docs as well, but unfortunately we've only got the LT right now, so I don't have the ability to add them on there. So I have talked with board docs a little bit, but yes, I think it's a valuable resource, and I think the other boards for the city would find value in it as well. So it's something we are talking about doing.
So TBD down the road, something to be considered. Yeah, that's great. And I wanted to just ask Michelle, if you could talk about, I know you've probably worked with a few of our subscribers that have made that very same switch, where they maybe were just using it with the main governing body and then decided over time that they wanted to expand the usage. And can you talk a little bit about what that process entails?
Absolutely. I think one of the things to consider is what we've been talking about, where they take their meeting management, how they're putting together their packets. A lot of times it's different folks than the people that are putting together the city council's packets. The other thing to consider is that you can have as many different templates as you want. So a lot of people just don't know that they can do that. And so give your board docs rep a call support, and we'll help you out and walk you through it. But if you don't have board docs, keep in mind that a lot of these folks are maybe not at city council all the time. So having something that's mobile is really going to increase the value of board docs. But the last thing I want to talk about, and something that when we're talking to cities and counties and government agencies and special districts, is what I talked about earlier with the goal tracking. A lot of zoning departments have construction projects going on, or they will have different projects like the corridor project that I mentioned with Brian that they want to be able to track. Maybe it's a public goal, maybe it's something that just their department needs to keep eyes on. So that's really also where you can sell value to the other departments. If you need to use board docs for strategic planning and you don't need to use it for meeting management, that's fine. Eventually they'll sort of give in and realize how great it is. But just using this for project tracking is a great way to really leverage this for everybody within the organization.
Great, thank you so much. Well, we are at 45 of the hour, so I think as we promised, we would keep this to just 45 minutes today. And so I want to just take a moment and thank so much Tracy Glanz and Michelle Cooper, my two colleagues, for joining me today on this webinar. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to attend this session. I hope that this was helpful. And I want to say a special thanks to Amanda Finney, who organized a great session. Thank you so much, everyone. And this was recorded. We will be providing a follow-up email that includes a link to the recording and to the slides. And we also will ask just a few follow-up questions. We'd love to hear from you, how we can improve webinars, what you'd like to hear about next. Always want to make sure that we're giving you information that's valuable and interesting for you. So by all means, please share your feedback with us so that we can continue to improve what we're doing. And thank you all so much for attending today, and have a great day.